When we found them, they were huddled in a cavern that stank of decay, hidden on a moon that was barely more than a cratered rock. Their bodies flickered in the shadows, tiny, insect-like, with wings that pulsed with a bioluminescent glow. The Elysians were a pitiful sight, smaller than I had imagined, huddling together for warmth, though there was no warmth to be found here. I had seen a lot of bad things during my time with the Corps, but this hit different. "Are we really doing this?" Amir's voice crackled in my earpiece. I could tell he was skeptical, could almost hear him rolling his eyes on the other side of the room. He was crouched behind a crate of supplies, scanning the entrance to the cavern while I inched closer to the huddled mass. "They've been abandoned, Amir," I muttered back. "Look at them. They're barely alive." "Yeah, well, so were we on Hesper 7, and no one came to our rescue," he said, glancing over at me. "Why are we risking everything for them?" That was the question, wasn't it? Why risk everything for a species barely bigger than my hand, whose only talents seemed to be shining in the dark? But I couldn't look away from them. I reached out to the one closest to me, a small, frail-looking creature with translucent wings that glowed a soft blue. Its eyes were wide, hollow with exhaustion and fear, but when I extended my hand, it didn't flinch. Instead, its glow shifted from blue to a tentative green, pulsing with a warmth that I felt resonate deep in my chest. "They trust us," I said softly, feeling the odd calm of that green glow spreading through me. Amir grunted, but he didn't argue. And for Amir, that was practically an endorsement. "They're going to die if we don't do something," I said. The Elysians were on the verge of extinction, and every other major power in the galaxy had turned its back on them. The Elysians had no weapons, no defenses, and apparently no value, at least, none that any of the big players saw anymore. Once, they had been valued for the rare mineral on their homeworld. But when the veins ran dry, their so-called allies had pulled out, abandoning them to the fate of a dying planet. "Captain Cole," a voice crackled in my earpiece, interrupting my thoughts. "This is command. You are instructed to return immediately." "Negative," I replied instantly, my voice hard. "We're not leaving them." There was a pause on the other end, and I imagined the expressions on their faces as they heard my defiance. Captain Adrian Cole, refusing a direct order. It wasn't the first time, and it wouldn't be the last. "Captain, we don't have the resources for this operation," Command said, a little colder now. "We can't be everywhere, and this species is, well, they're not a strategic priority." "Not a strategic priority," I repeated, feeling the weight of the words in my mouth. I looked down at the Elysians, the soft green glow shifting to a troubled blue. They understood, maybe not the language, but the tone, the finality, and they were bracing themselves for disappointment. Again. I felt a surge of anger, hot and sudden. Well, with all due respect, maybe humanity should decide what its priorities are. Silence on the other end. Amir snorted, half amused, half exasperated. "You know that's going to go over well." "We're not leaving," I said firmly, making sure they heard every word. "These people are going to die if we don't do something, so we're doing something." A deep sigh came over the line, and then the connection clicked off. I was on my own. "Guess it's just us," I said, glancing back at Amir. He shrugged, but there was a small smile on his face. "Always is." We didn't have much, a couple of rations, some medical supplies, and enough fuel to get us back to the main cruiser, if we used it carefully. But that wasn't enough to save a whole species, let alone one that looked like it could snap in half if the wind blew too hard. "They look like something out of a nightmare," Amir muttered, eyeing the Elysians as they huddled closer. The one near me leaned in, pulsing with that soft green light again, almost as if it were trying to comfort me instead of the other way around. "I think they're beautiful," I said, watching as the little creature inched closer, its antennae twitching as it studied me. Amir just grunted. "You always were a sucker for lost causes, Adrian." I didn't argue. He was right. For the next few hours, we did what we could to patch up the Elysians. I wasn't a medic, and neither was Amir, but basic field training had taught us enough to bandage wounds, check vitals, and administer painkillers. The Elysians were gentle, cooperative, their glowing wings flickering in soft shades of gratitude. They didn't resist, didn't question us, and for some reason, that made me feel all the more responsible for them. Then, just as we were starting to settle in, the ground shook. "What the hell?" Amir hissed, grabbing his rifle and looking around the cavern. The Elysians flinched, their wings turning a panicked red as the tremor echoed through the walls. I tightened my grip on my blaster, scanning the shadows for any sign of movement. This moon was supposed to be abandoned, a dead rock on the edge of nowhere, but something had just landed outside, and from the sound of it, it was big. "Amir, get them to the back," I ordered, gesturing to the Elysians. "I'll hold whoever it is off." "Not a chance," he muttered, though he quickly started herding the Elysians further into the cavern, keeping his weapon trained on the entrance. The air grew cold, sharp with the tang of machinery and metal as something approached, heavy footsteps echoing down the tunnel. I could feel my pulse racing, every instinct on high alert. Whoever it was, they were here for the Elysians, and they were prepared to fight for them. "Stay low," I whispered, positioning myself in front of the entrance, my blaster trained on the darkness. Then they came into view. They were towering figures, clad in dark armor with strange, curved weapons that glowed faintly in the dim light. They moved with the cold precision of professionals, scanning the cavern with ruthless efficiency. I didn't recognize the species, but that didn't matter. They were soldiers. They were here to finish what the galaxy had started, the eradication of the Elysians. "You have no business here, human," one of them said, his voice distorted by the translator on his chest. He didn't raise his weapon, but the threat was clear in his tone. "Leave, and we won't harm you." I glanced back at the Elysians, trembling in the shadows, their wings flashing a frantic red. The leader's gaze followed mine, and a slow, cruel smile crept onto his face. "They're vermin," he said dismissively. "Their planet is dead. They are dead. You cannot save them." "Maybe," I said, stepping forward, my blaster held steady. "But they're not dead yet." He laughed, a harsh, grating sound that echoed through the cavern. "You would risk your life for these insects?" I didn't answer. I didn't need to. With a flick of his wrist, he signaled his men to move forward, weapons raised. My pulse quickened, my body tense as I braced myself for the fight. Amir took up a position behind me, his own weapon ready, his face grim but determined. "Here we go," he muttered, glancing at me with a wry smile. "Just like old times." The first shot rang out, searing through the air and narrowly missing my shoulder. I fired back, the cavern filling with the crack of blasters and the flash of muzzle fire. The Elysians huddled together, their wings pulsing in terror as the battle raged around them. For every soldier we took down, two more seemed to appear, their faces blank and unfeeling as they closed in on us. My blaster was starting to overheat, and I could see the strain on Amir's face as he reloaded, his movements growing slower and more desperate. "Captain, we're running low," he hissed, his eyes darting around the cavern. I gritted my teeth, my mind racing as I tried to think of a way out. But there was no way out, not this time. And then, just as hope was starting to slip away, I felt a gentle touch on my shoulder. I glanced down, surprised to see the little Elysian that had reached out to me before. Its wings were glowing a fierce, determined green, and it looked up at me with an intensity that took my breath away. "They want to help," Amir whispered, his voice tinged with awe. I didn't know what that meant, or how they could possibly help, but I nodded, trusting them with a faith I couldn't explain. And then, one by one, the Elysians began to glow. Their wings shimmered with a blinding light, filling the cavern with a brilliance that forced the enemy soldiers to recoil, shielding their eyes as they staggered back. In that moment, I realized what the Elysians were doing. They were pouring every ounce of their strength, their very essence, into one last stand. And as the light grew brighter, more intense, I felt a fierce surge of pride. Because for once, humanity wasn't the only one fighting for something worth saving. I had been in battles before, but nothing prepared me for this. The light was blinding, a fierce, concentrated wave of green and white pouring out from the Elysians. It filled the cavern, a radiant force that pushed against the armored soldiers as they tried to advance. I'd read somewhere that their bioluminescent pulses had different meanings: green for trust, white for peace, red for danger, but I had never seen anything like this. Whatever this new glow was, it was holding back a dozen soldiers, forcing them to their knees, shielding Amir and me as we fired at them through the haze. But then, just as quickly as it started, the light began to fade. I felt a pang of dread as the Elysians' glow dimmed, their wings flickering weakly, their strength clearly drained. The little one closest to me wobbled on its spindly legs, its once luminous wings now a pale, sickly yellow. They're using themselves up, Amir whispered, his eyes wide. They're burning themselves out to protect us. Then let's make sure it's worth it, I said, my voice harder than I intended. Cover me. We've got to finish this. I could see the toll it was taking on Amir, too, the tight lines on his face, the fatigue etched into his movements. But he gave me a nod and raised his weapon, holding his position as I moved forward toward the closest soldier, whose armor had cracked under the pressure of the Elysian's strange, radiant force. I lunged, firing as I moved, and took him down with a single shot to the chestplate. The remaining soldiers regrouped, clearly shaken by the Elysian's display, but not ready to give up. Their leader barked an order, his voice a sharp, metallic hiss, and they raised their weapons, moving forward as one, shields up, ready for another attack. But they weren't ready for Amir. He darted out from behind his cover, tossing a small, dark object into the midst of the soldiers, a small, high-powered pulse grenade. It detonated with a deep, resonant boom, sending a shockwave through the cavern, and the soldiers were thrown back, their armor cracked, their formation broken. In the chaos, I saw our chance. I grabbed Amir by the arm, pulling him toward the Elysians, who were barely holding on, their wings fluttering weakly, their glow almost completely gone. We had to get them out of there. This is it, I said, my voice urgent. If we don't move now, we'll lose them. Every last one. Amir nodded, his face grim. Together, we scooped up as many of the Elysians as we could, carrying them carefully in our arms. They were light, almost weightless, their tiny bodies trembling as they clung to us, their wings wrapping around our arms with a fragile, desperate strength. I could feel the faint warmth of their bioluminescence pulsing against my skin, a steady, rhythmic beat that matched the pounding of my own heart. We moved quickly, keeping low, weaving through the shadows as we made our way back to the shuttle. Behind us, I could hear the soldiers recovering, their leader shouting orders, the sound of footsteps echoing through the cavern. We didn't have much time. Keep going, Amir muttered, his eyes fixed on the shuttle up ahead. We're almost there. We stumbled into the clearing where the shuttle waited, its sleek, dark hull gleaming in the faint starlight. I punched in the access code, the hatch hissed open, and we hurried inside, the Elysians still clinging to us, their wings flickering faintly in the dim light. Strap in, I said, sliding into the pilot's seat, my fingers flying over the controls. The engines roared to life, a low, steady hum that vibrated through the hull, and I felt a surge of relief as the shuttle lifted off, carrying us up, away from the moon's surface, away from the soldiers who would have gladly wiped out an entire species without a second thought. As we broke through the moon's thin atmosphere, I glanced over at Amir, who was slumped in his seat, his face pale, his eyes half closed. "You good?" I asked, my voice soft, careful not to startle him. He opened one eye, a faint smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. "I'm still here, aren't I?" I let out a breath I didn't realize I'd been holding, a quiet laugh escaping my lips. "Yeah, you are." The Elysians huddled in the back of the shuttle, their wings still flickering faintly, their eyes wide with a mixture of fear and gratitude. I could feel their gaze on me, a silent, unspoken question hanging in the air. "What now?" "We're taking you somewhere safe," I said, my voice steady, reassuring. "Somewhere they can't hurt you." They didn't respond, of course, but their wings pulsed a soft, gentle green, and I felt a strange, warm sensation spreading through me, a sense of calm, of peace. For a brief moment, the weight of everything, the battle, the danger, the uncertainty seemed to fade away, replaced by a quiet, unshakable determination. We would find a way to protect them. Somehow, we would keep them safe. The journey back to the cruiser was a quiet one. Amir was slumped in his seat, eyes closed, breathing shallow, and even, while I kept my focus on the controls, my mind racing, trying to figure out our next move. We couldn't go back to command. They'd made it clear that the Elysians weren't a priority, that they were willing to let an entire species die rather than waste resources on a so-called lost cause. But that didn't mean we had nowhere to go. There were places, outposts, abandoned research stations, uncharted planets, places where we could hide, where we could keep the Elysians safe, at least for a little while. The galaxy was a big place, and if there was one thing I'd learned over the years, it was that sometimes you had to disappear to survive. The comms panel beeped, a soft, insistent chime that pulled me out of my thoughts. I glanced down, frowning as I saw the incoming signal. It was an encrypted channel, one I hadn't seen in years. Only a handful of people even knew it existed. With a sense of dread, I opened the channel, bracing myself for the worst. Captain Cole. The voice was cold, detached, a voice I hadn't heard in years, a voice I'd hoped never to hear again. Director Havorson, I said, my tone carefully neutral. To what do I owe the pleasure? I see you've been busy, Havorson said, his voice tinged with a faint hint of amusement. Rescuing a species no one cares about, defying direct orders. Quite the impressive resume you're building. I clenched my jaw, resisting the urge to respond, to tell him exactly what I thought of his so-called priorities. But I held my tongue, knowing that any reaction would only feed into his game. You don't have to do this, Cole, Havorson continued, his tone smooth, almost persuasive. Come back to command. Bring the Elysians. We'll take care of everything. I laughed, a harsh, bitter sound that echoed through the cockpit. Like you took care of them before? By leaving them to die. There was a pause on the other end, a brief silence that spoke volumes. Think carefully, Cole, Havorson said, his voice colder now, more controlled. You're risking everything for these creatures. Your career, your life. Is it really worth it? I glanced over at the Elysians, huddled together, their wings pulsing with that soft, hopeful green, their eyes fixed on me with a quiet, unwavering trust. And in that moment, I knew my answer. Yes, I said, my voice firm, unyielding. It's worth it. Havorson sighed, a low, exasperated sound. Very well, you've made your choice. The line went dead, leaving an eerie silence in its wake. A silence that seemed to stretch on, heavy and oppressive, filling the cockpit with a sense of finality. I knew what Havorson's words meant. He would come after us, hunt us down, do everything in his power to ensure that the Elysians, and anyone who stood with them, were erased from existence. But I wasn't afraid. Not anymore. Amir stirred, his eyes flickering open, his gaze unfocused as he looked around, blinking in confusion. What did I miss? Just the usual, I said, a faint smile tugging at my lips. Command isn't too happy with us. He snorted, a rough, tired laugh escaping his lips. Well, that's nothing new. No, I agreed, my voice soft, my gaze drifting to the Elysians. It's not. But this time, it felt different. This time, we weren't just fighting for survival. We were fighting for something more, something worth risking everything for. And as the stars stretched out before us, a vast, endless expanse of possibilities, I knew that no matter what happened, we wouldn't be alone. I had known Havorson's threats weren't idle, but even I wasn't prepared for how relentless he could be. From the moment our comms line went dead, it felt like a silent clock had started ticking. Every signal we sent, every bit of data we accessed, it all left a breadcrumb trail, a target painted on our backs. Amir and I were now fugitives, but we weren't just running for ourselves. We were running for the last of the Elysians, whose lives depended on us keeping them hidden from an entire galaxy ready to dismiss them as collateral damage. And it didn't take long for things to start heating up. It had been 2 weeks since we escaped the moon. 2 weeks of dodging patrols, relying on the barest rations, taking shifts so at least one of us was always watching over the elisions. The strain was starting to show on Amir, who was barely holding up, the weight of our decision pressing down on both of us. "We can't keep this up," Amir said one night, his voice a low murmur, careful not to wake the Elysians sleeping in the back of the ship. He looked at me, his eyes shadowed, filled with exhaustion. "We need a plan, Adrian. A real one." "I know," I replied, rubbing a hand over my face, feeling the grit of sleepless nights. "But it's not just a matter of finding a place to hide. Wherever we go, Heverson will have eyes. We need somewhere, off the grid, untraceable." Amir was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting to the Elysians, who were nestled together, their wings wrapped around each other in a soft cocoon of bioluminescent light. It was hard to imagine that these fragile creatures had somehow inspired us to take on the whole galaxy. "I might have a place in mind," he said finally, his voice hesitant. "But it's a risk." I looked at him, sensing the weight behind his words. "Where?" He swallowed, his gaze flicking to the comms panel, the unlit console that we'd kept offline since our last encounter with Command. "There's a station, a black market outpost in the uncharted zone. It's not technically on any charts, but the right people know about it." I stared at him, surprised. "And you're one of those people?" He shrugged, a faint, wry smile crossing his lips. "Let's just say I wasn't always the squeaky clean soldier Command would like to think." I couldn't help but chuckle, the sound rough, tired. This just gets better and better. But despite the humor, a part of me felt a strange relief. Maybe this was the break we needed, the chance to disappear, even if only for a while, to buy ourselves some time. "All right," I said, my voice firm. "Set the coordinates. Let's get moving." The outpost was called Eclipse Station, a fitting name given its reputation as a place where people went to disappear. It was hidden in the heart of an asteroid belt, surrounded by jagged rocks and swirling debris, shielded from prying eyes by a powerful cloaking field that masked its location from even the most advanced sensors. Only those with the right access codes and a certain disregard for galactic law could find it. As we approached, I could feel the tension in the air, a silent, unspoken anxiety that prickled at the edges of my mind. Amir was at the controls, guiding the shuttle carefully through the asteroid field, his gaze sharp, focused, his hands steady on the controls. "Here we go," he muttered, his voice low, almost to himself. "Keep your eyes open. The locals aren't exactly the friendly type." I nodded, my hand resting on the sidearm holstered at my side. It had been a long time since I'd dealt with black market operators, but I knew enough to be wary. These were people who dealt in secrets, in stolen goods and illegal tech, people who made their living on the fringes of society. Trust was a rare commodity here, and loyalty even rarer. As we docked, I turned to the Elysians, who were huddled together, their wings flickering with a faint, nervous light. "Stay here," I said softly, my voice gentle. "We won't be long." They didn't respond, but I could see the fear in their eyes, the way their wings trembled, the faint, almost imperceptible flicker of their bioluminescence as they watched us. I felt a pang of guilt, a sudden, fierce protectiveness that took me by surprise. But there was no time to dwell on it. I gave Amir a nod, and together, we stepped off the shuttle, entering the dimly lit corridors of Eclipse Station. The place was exactly what I expected: dark, narrow, filled with the smell of stale air and grease, the walls lined with flickering neon lights that cast eerie, distorted shadows across the floor. People moved through the corridors in small groups, their faces hidden beneath hoods and masks, their eyes wary, suspicious. I could feel the weight of their gaze on us, a silent, unspoken challenge that hung in the air. "Keep moving," Amir muttered, his voice low, barely audible. "We don't want to draw attention." I nodded, my hand resting on my sidearm as we made our way through the station, heading for the back, where Amir said we'd find the contact he'd arranged, a man named Rook, who specialized in disappearing people for a price. When we finally found him, he was exactly what I'd expected: a tall, wiry figure with a sharp, angular face and a pair of piercing, hawk-like eyes that seemed to miss nothing. He was dressed in dark, worn clothes, a knife strapped to his thigh, a blaster slung across his chest. "Amir," he said, his voice a rough, gravelly sound that grated against my nerves. "It's been a while." "Rook," Amir replied, his tone cool, wary. "We need a favor." Rook raised an eyebrow, his gaze flicking to me, then back to Amir. "And what makes you think I'm in the business of doing favors?" "Because I've got something you want," Amir said, his voice low, a faint, dangerous smile tugging at the corner of his mouth. Rook's eyes narrowed, a glint of interest flickering in their depths. "I'm listening." Amir reached into his jacket, pulling out a small data chip, holding it up for Rook to see. "Coordinates to an unregistered cache of military-grade weaponry, right in the heart of command territory." Rook's eyes widened, a faint, hungry look crossing his face. "And why would you give that up?" "Because we need protection," Amir replied, his voice steady, calm. "We're on the run, and we've got cargo that command wants. We need somewhere to lay low, somewhere off the grid, and we need you to keep it quiet." Rook was silent for a moment, his gaze flicking between us, calculating, assessing. Finally, he gave a slow nod, a faint, satisfied smile spreading across his face. "All right," he said, his voice a low, satisfied murmur. "You've got yourself a deal." The hiding place Rook provided was a small, run-down cargo hold at the edge of the station, barely big enough to fit the shuttle and a few supplies. But it was safe, and for the moment, that was all that mattered. Amir and I worked quickly, unloading what little we had, setting up a makeshift living area for the Elysians, who watched us with wide, uncertain eyes, their wings fluttering with a faint, nervous glow. "It's not much," I said softly, crouching down beside the little one who had clung to me back on the moon, his tiny, fragile form trembling as he looked around, taking in the cramped, dimly lit space. "But it's safe. You'll be safe here." The little one looked up at me, his eyes filled with a mixture of fear and trust, a silent, unspoken question that pierced through my heart. I reached out, resting a gentle hand on his shoulder, feeling the soft, warm glow of his bioluminescence against my skin. "You're safe," I repeated, my voice barely a whisper. "I promise." But even as I said the words, I could feel the weight of them pressing down on me, a heavy, suffocating pressure that filled my chest, made it hard to breathe. Because I knew that this safety was only temporary, a fragile, fleeting thing that could be shattered at any moment. We were running out of time, and sooner or later, Havorson would catch up with us. The next few days passed in a blur of tension and uncertainty. We stayed hidden in the cargo hold, relying on Rook's contacts to keep us supplied with food and water, keeping a low profile, trying to avoid drawing attention. But the strain was starting to show, both on Amir and me, and on the Elysians, whose bioluminescent glow grew fainter with each passing day. "They're not doing well," Amir said one evening, his voice low, worried. He was watching the Elysians, who were huddled together in the corner, their wings wrapped tightly around each other, their eyes dim, unfocused. I nodded, my heart aching as I watched them, feeling a fierce, protective urge rise up within me. "They need more than we can give them here," I said softly, my voice filled with a sense of helplessness that I couldn't shake. Amir was silent for a moment, his gaze fixed on the Elysians, a look of guilt and frustration etched across his face. "We can't keep doing this, Adrian," he said finally, his voice barely a whisper. "We can't keep running. We need to find a way to end this, once and for all." I looked at him, feeling the weight of his words settle over me, a heavy, suffocating sense of dread that filled my chest, made it hard to breathe. Because I knew he was right. We couldn't keep running forever. Sooner or later, we'd have to face Havorson to take a stand. And as I looked at the Elysians, at the fragile, delicate creatures who had somehow come to mean so much to me, I knew that I would do whatever it took to protect them, even if it meant risking everything. As fugitives, every movement we made was risky, but finding a way to protect the Elysians and ourselves was non-negotiable. Eclipse Station had bought us a few days of quiet, but I could tell by Amir's expression that our situation felt more temporary with every hour. The Elysians needed more resources and rest than we could provide in this black market hideout, and Rook's favor wasn't going to last forever. The sound of heavy footsteps from down the corridor snapped me out of my thoughts. Amir and I exchanged a look, and I moved swiftly to the side of the cargo hold, positioning myself near the access door. We couldn't afford any surprises, not here. The door slid open, revealing Rook. He stepped into the room without hesitation, his narrow eyes scanning the dimly lit space. "Hope you two are settled in," he said, the faintest hint of a smirk tugging at the corner of his mouth. His gaze drifted over the Elysians, who huddled together in the corner, wary but silent. "Cut to the chase, Rook," Amir said, folding his arms across his chest. "You didn't come here for a social call." Rook shrugged. "Word's out. There's interest in the new visitors here on Eclipse, and that's bound to bring some heat our way. So I need to know, how much longer are you planning to squat in my station?" I stepped forward, keeping my tone calm but firm. "We're not here by choice. You know we wouldn't have come to Eclipse if we had any other options." "That may be, but you've put a bounty on my head just by being here," Rook replied, crossing his arms. "Command's been sniffing around, asking questions they don't usually ask. Makes people nervous." I exchanged a look with Amir. We'd both been expecting this, but hearing it confirmed set my nerves on edge. "What are you getting at?" I asked carefully. Rook leaned against the wall, studying us. "It's simple. I need compensation. I'll keep you safe for a while longer, but in return, you're going to do me a favor." Amir's eyes narrowed. "We don't owe you any favors, Rook. We already gave you what you asked for. Sure, you gave me a location, but that information won't keep Command off my back if they decide to raid this place. I need something a little more direct." I could see Amir's jaw tighten, but I put a hand on his shoulder, silently telling him to hold back. "What kind of favor?" Rook's smirk widened. "There's a shipment arriving at one of the outer docks in 12 hours. I need you to be there to pick it up and make sure it arrives here safely. It's sensitive cargo, and I can't risk Command getting their hands on it." Amir scoffed. "So you want us to do your dirty work?" "Call it an arrangement," Rook said with a shrug. "You keep my shipment safe, and I keep you and your feathered friends hidden a little while longer." I knew we didn't have a choice. We couldn't risk losing our only sanctuary, not with Command hunting us down. I glanced at Amir, who gave a reluctant nod. "Fine," I said. "We'll do it." The outer dock was a maze of poorly lit corridors, the air thick with the smell of engine oil and stale rations. Amir and I moved quickly through the shadows, keeping to the edges, avoiding the clusters of workers and smugglers that lingered around every corner. The place was buzzing with activity, but no one paid us any mind. It was a good sign, at least, for now. "Rook's shipment should be in Dock 5, Amir murmured as we rounded a corner, keeping his voice low. We reached the docking area without incident, and I immediately spotted the shipment. It was a series of heavy, reinforced crates, each marked with symbols that I didn't recognize. I shot Amir a questioning look, but he just shook his head, equally clueless. "Let's get this over with," I muttered. As we started to move the crates, a sudden shout from across the dock made us freeze. I turned just in time to see a group of figures approaching 4 men, each armed and looking right at us. One of them stepped forward, his eyes hard, calculating. "That's quite a shipment you've got there," he said, his tone laced with suspicion. "Mind telling me where you're taking it?" "Not really," I replied, keeping my voice steady. "This is private cargo. None of your concern." The man's expression didn't change. "Everything's my concern on this dock." I felt Amir tense beside me, and I could tell he was sizing up the situation, calculating our odds. We couldn't afford a firefight, not here, but we couldn't let them stop us either. "Look," I said, taking a step forward, hands raised in a gesture of peace. "We're just here to move some cargo. No need to complicate things." The man's eyes flicked to his companions, and I could see a flash of irritation in his gaze. He wasn't backing down, and I knew we were out of options. "Move," he ordered, gesturing with his weapon. I gave Amir a quick nod, and in an instant we were in motion. I dropped low, swinging my leg out to knock the man off balance, while Amir lunged at the nearest guard, driving his elbow into the man's ribs. The dock erupted in a flurry of movement as we fought, dodging blows and trying to keep the noise to a minimum. Within seconds, it was over. The men lay on the ground, unconscious, and Amir and I quickly resumed moving the crates, working in silence. "Let's move before anyone else shows up," Amir muttered. We finished loading the crates and made our way back to Eclipse Station without further incident. But my mind was already racing. This job had been too close for comfort, and I couldn't shake the feeling that we'd just painted an even bigger target on our backs. When we returned to Eclipse, Rook was waiting for us. He eyed the crates with a satisfied smile, but I could tell he was already calculating his next move. "Nicely done," he said, his tone almost mocking. "See? That wasn't so hard." I didn't respond, but Amir stepped forward, his expression hard. "You got what you wanted. Now you hold up your end of the deal." Rook raised an eyebrow, amused. "Of course. You have my word, you're safe here, for now." I didn't like the way he said it, but there was nothing we could do. We'd bought ourselves a little more time, but it was clear that Rook would keep pushing for more, as long as he held the upper hand. Back in the cargo hold, the Elysians were waiting for us. The little one came up to me, his eyes filled with silent questions, and I crouched down, offering a reassuring smile. "We're safe," I said softly. "For now." The Elysians seemed to relax, their wings glowing faintly, and I felt a surge of relief. But Amir was watching me, his expression troubled. "This can't go on, Adrian," he said quietly. "Rook's not going to protect us forever. We need a plan." "I know," I replied, my voice heavy. "But we don't have any other options. Not yet." Amir was silent for a moment, his gaze drifting to the Elysians. "We can't let them down," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "They're counting on us." "I know," I said again, feeling the weight of his words settle over me. "We'll find a way." But as I looked at the Elysians, I couldn't shake the feeling that time was running out. Days passed in a tense silence, with Amir and I keeping a watchful eye on the Elysians and the surrounding halls of Eclipse Station. I knew the situation with Rook was temporary at best, but for now it was all we had. The Elysians were safe here, and that was worth a lot. Then came the alert. It was early, just after our brief sleep cycles. The lights in the cargo hold dimmed for an instant, followed by the blaring alarm we'd come to recognize as Eclipse Station's version of a polite warning. I shot up, meeting Amir's gaze, and we both bolted toward the control room. Whatever this was, it was bad news, and it wouldn't be long before it found us. Rook's voice crackled over the loudspeakers, a mix of tension and barely concealed annoyance. "Attention, all personnel. This is not a drill. Command forces are on their way to Eclipse Station. All non-essential personnel, prepare to vacate or bunker down. They'll be here in 15. "Command," Amir said, his tone grim. "What in the hell are they doing here?" I didn't answer. We both knew Command didn't just conduct inspections on fringe stations without reason. They'd gotten wind of something or someone that had piqued their interest. My mind raced, calculating our options. "They're probably here for the Elysians," I said, lowering my voice so our new companions wouldn't overhear. "But if Command's involved, they'll go through every inch of this station. We can't stay in the cargo hold." "We'll need to move them, quickly," Amir agreed, his voice barely above a whisper. "And we'll need a distraction." I considered this, glancing around at the crates and makeshift bunkers we'd piled into this cargo space. If Command got even a hint of the Elysians' presence, it would mean immediate discovery and likely worse. I motioned to Amir. "We'll lead them to the central reactor deck. It's crowded enough there that they'll blend in, at least for a while." "Crowded enough for a fight, too, if it comes to that," Amir replied with a grim nod. We both moved quickly, gathering the Elysians and explaining in hushed tones that we needed to relocate. They followed without question, their quiet trust somehow making this whole mess feel even heavier. In their eyes, we were still the guardians they'd chosen, even if we weren't entirely sure we could live up to that title. We made our way through the dim, winding corridors, sticking to the station's darker levels to avoid command's likely points of entry. I knew Eclipse Station's layout better than most, and I silently thanked the years I'd spent here, learning every inch of this place. It wasn't much, but it gave us a slim edge. We rounded a corner, and I motioned for everyone to stop. Footsteps echoed ahead, and we ducked into an alcove just as a pair of command officers passed by, their voices low and tense. Check all the lower levels. Report any anomalies directly to command center. Their footsteps faded, and I exhaled. We're running out of time. The central reactor's close by. Once we're there, we can figure out our next move. Amir nodded, his eyes scanning the hall. Let's keep moving. The central reactor deck was buzzing with activity. Engineers and cargo loaders moved in every direction, focused on their own tasks. It was the heart of the station, and it offered the perfect cover. We slipped in, blending with the crowd as best as we could. I kept an eye on the Elysians, who huddled close, trying to avoid the curious gazes that occasionally drifted their way. We didn't get far before the situation took a turn. A squad of command officers rounded the far corner, their eyes sweeping over the area with cold, calculated efficiency. They were too thorough. Even with the distraction of the reactor hum, I could tell they wouldn't miss us if they got close enough. Amir nudged me. They're going to find us. We need a better cover. Before I could respond, a familiar face stepped into view. Rook. He caught sight of us and gave a small nod, subtly motioning us toward a side passage. I didn't know why he was helping us. Maybe he didn't want the attention command would bring, or maybe he had some other plan. Either way, it was an opportunity we couldn't pass up. We slipped into the passage, Rook following a few steps behind. Once we were out of earshot of the crowd, he spoke, his tone low and urgent. They're not here for the Elysians. They're here for you. Amir and I exchanged a confused glance. What do you mean, they're here for us? I asked. Rook shrugged. Apparently, you've both been labeled as subversive elements. Seems command's not too happy about you running around with alien refugees. I felt a wave of anger and frustration. It didn't make sense, but then, nothing command did ever made sense. So they're willing to raid a whole station just to get to us. Rook's expression was unreadable. They don't take risks. As far as they're concerned, anyone who questions their authority is a threat. He gestured toward the passageway ahead. There's a maintenance shaft that leads to the station's outer rim. From there, you can access the emergency pods. It's your best shot. Why are you helping us? Amir asked, suspicion evident in his tone. Rook gave a dry chuckle. Don't get too comfortable. I'm not doing this out of kindness. The sooner you're off my station, the sooner things can go back to normal. I didn't trust him, but we didn't have a choice. Fine. Show us the way. The maintenance shaft was cramped, the walls covered in layers of grime and metal piping. The Elysians moved in silence, their normally radiant feathers dulled in the dim light. I could feel their tension, their fear, and it only added to the weight pressing on my chest. After what felt like hours, we reached the end of the shaft. Rook pointed to a hatch above us. That leads to the outer rim. From there, you can access the pods. But be quick, command won't take long to notice you're missing. I nodded, gripping the ladder and starting to climb. Amir followed, the Elysians right behind him. We moved as fast as we could, the sense of urgency pushing us forward. The outer rim was cold and eerily silent, the only sound the faint hum of the station systems. The emergency pods were a short distance away, tucked into alcoves along the rim's curved wall. Just as we reached the pods, an alarm blared, echoing through the passageway. Damn it, Amir muttered. They're on to us. I moved quickly, activating the pod's entry hatch. The Elysians filed in, their wide eyes filled with fear, but also a strange, quiet determination. I gave Amir a quick nod, and he followed them, squeezing into the small, cramped space. I was the last to enter, and just as I reached the hatch, a shout echoed from behind us. Command officers rounded the corner, their weapons raised, eyes locked on us. "Go," I shouted to Amir, slamming the hatch shut just as a volley of shots rang out. The metal door absorbed the impact, but I could hear the officers' voices, their orders to breach the pod. I hit the launch button, and the pod shuddered as it detached from the station. For a moment, everything was silent, and then we were moving, the pod hurtling away from Eclipse Station. The pod systems were basic, designed for emergency evacuations, not long-term travel. The air was thin, the controls limited, but for now, we were safe. I watched Eclipse Station fade into the distance, a mixture of relief and regret filling me. We'd lost our only sanctuary, but at least we were still alive. Amir leaned back, his face pale but calm. "We need to find a new place to land, somewhere they won't find us." I nodded, scanning the pod's limited navigation systems. We didn't have many options, but there was a small, uninhabited moon a few light years away. It was barren, isolated, and it might just give us the time we needed to come up with a new plan. The Elysians sat quietly, their eyes fixed on the stars outside the pod's small viewport. I could see the worry in their expressions, but also a strange, unwavering trust. They'd chosen to follow us, even into this, and that knowledge weighed on me. Amir's voice broke the silence. "We can't keep running forever, Adrian." "I know," I replied, feeling the exhaustion settle over me. "But for now, it's all we can do." We drifted in silence, the pod carrying us through the endless void, away from the station, away from everything we'd known. The journey ahead was uncertain, filled with dangers we couldn't yet see. But as I looked at the Elysians and Amir, I felt a renewed sense of purpose. The silence of space wrapped around us like a shroud, punctuated only by the low hum of the pod's life support systems. I sat at the control panel, staring at the blinking lights and faded screens. It was hard to believe how much had changed in such a short time. Just days ago, we were operating within the confines of Eclipse Station, hoping to build a sanctuary for the Elysians. Now, we were refugees, hurtling through the void toward an uncertain future. Amir sat beside me, his eyes scanning the small viewport that offered a view of the stars. I could sense his unease, the same anxiety that gripped me. We had a brief respite from Command's pursuit, but it wouldn't last long. I had no doubt that our escape would prompt a full-scale hunt for us. The pod's navigation system beeped, and I focused on the readouts. We were approaching the uninhabited moon, designated simply as Theta 9. It was a small, rocky place, devoid of life, but capable of providing temporary shelter. I felt a flicker of hope. If we could find a way to hide the Elysians there, it would buy us some time to regroup and figure out our next move. "Approaching Theta 9, I announced, my voice steady despite the tumult of emotions swirling within me. "Prepare for landing." Amir nodded, and I switched the pod systems to landing mode. The descent was rough, the pod shuddering as it broke through the thin atmosphere. I gripped the controls, guiding us toward a relatively flat area on the surface. I had no desire to crash land. With a final jolt, the pod settled on the moon's surface. I released a breath I didn't know I'd been holding. We made it. "Barely," Amir said, giving me a wry smile. "Let's hope the locals don't mind our arrival." I chuckled softly at the comment, then turned to the Elysians. "We'll be stepping out soon. Stay close and follow my lead." Their expressions showed understanding, a mixture of curiosity and apprehension as they nodded. I pressed the button to open the hatch, and the door creaked open, revealing the desolate landscape of Theta 9. The first thing that struck me was the silence. There were no sounds of life, no winds whipping through trees or the distant calls of wildlife. Just an expanse of rocky terrain and craters stretching as far as the eye could see. The air felt thin and cold, a sharp contrast to the warmth of Eclipse Station. I stepped out first, followed closely by Amir and then the Elysians. As my boots touched the surface, I took a moment to absorb our surroundings. The moon had a barren beauty, gray and rugged, with a skyline that was a stark reminder of how far we had come from the vibrant life on other planets. "Let's move toward that ridge," I said, pointing toward a series of rocky outcrops in the distance. "It'll provide some cover, and we can get a better sense of our surroundings." The Elysians stayed close as we traversed the rocky terrain. Their feathers ruffled against the cold. I could see their discomfort, and I felt it too. The air lacked the warmth of community and safety we'd briefly found in Eclipse Station. The weight of the responsibility to protect them bore down on me, and I pushed it aside, focusing on the task at hand. Once we reached the ridge, I crouched down, scanning the horizon. There was nothing but rocks and dust for miles. "We'll set up camp here for now," I said. "We need to be vigilant, though. Command will be searching for us." Amir looked at me, his brow furrowed. "What's the plan, then? We can't just hide here indefinitely." I thought for a moment. "First, we need to establish some kind of perimeter. I'll set up the pod sensors to alert us of any approaching ships. If command shows up, we'll need to know about it." I started working on the pod systems, configuring the sensors while Amir helped the Elysians find a suitable spot to rest. They huddled together, their once bright plumage now dim against the cold backdrop of Theta 9. After a few minutes, I had the sensors operational, and I turned to Amir. "We should take shifts, keep watch." "I'll take the first one." "Fine by me," he replied, settling down on a flat rock. "I'll catch some rest while I can." I watched as he closed his eyes, the tension in his shoulders easing for the first time since we'd left Eclipse Station. With a mixture of concern and pride, I knew that this break was essential, but I also understood the risks involved. The hours dragged on, punctuated only by the occasional beep from the sensors. I scanned the desolate landscape, my thoughts wandering to what we'd left behind. The camaraderie we'd built among the Elysians, the challenges we had faced together, it felt surreal. Now, our fight for survival was just beginning. Eventually, Amir stirred, and I nodded at him. "Your turn." He stretched, the exhaustion still evident on his face. "Anything?" "Nothing yet," I replied, "but I'm not letting my guard down." He gave me a nod of appreciation before settling in for a watch. I retreated slightly, pulling out my rations and trying to eat, but my appetite was non-existent. The weight of uncertainty hung heavy over me, and it didn't help that every so often, I would catch the Elysians watching me with those wide, trusting eyes. They were looking to me for guidance, and I wasn't sure I was strong enough to provide it. The night wore on, and as the stars shone brightly above us, I felt a sense of connection to the universe. We were out here, lost and alone, but we were also free from the constraints of command and the conflict we'd left behind. There was a beauty in the stillness, one I couldn't fully appreciate in the chaos of our escape. The next day dawned cold and clear, and after a few hours of restless sleep, I felt the adrenaline kick back in. Amir and I took turns gathering supplies from the pod and scouring the surrounding area for anything useful. "Do you think we could salvage parts from the pod?" Amir asked, kicking at a piece of debris. "Maybe something to create a better defense?" I thought about it. "Maybe. We can't stay here forever, but if we can make it functional again, it might help us get off this rock if things get dicey." As we worked, the Elysians slowly started to explore their new surroundings, taking tentative steps away from the ridge. Their curiosity seemed to win over their fear, and I found myself relaxing just a little. The more they explored, the more I could see their spirits lifting, as if the desolation of Theta 9 was a fresh canvas for them. I watched as one of the Elysians, a younger one named Lyra, picked up a small rock, turning it over in her hands. She seemed fascinated by the texture, and for a moment, it felt like we were just a group of travelers taking a break on some remote world, not fugitives from a powerful authority. "Hey," Amir called, breaking my reverie. "I think I found something." I walked over to him, finding him beside a pile of scrap that had tumbled from the pod. Among the twisted metal and wires, there was a small power converter, damaged but salvageable. "This could work," I said, inspecting the component. We can use it to amplify our sensors or create a makeshift power source. Let's get it back to the pod, Amir replied, his face lighting up with a thrill of discovery. If we can make it work, we'll be one step closer to having a proper defense. Together, we transported the power converter back to the pod, the excitement of working together pushing aside the weight of our situation. As the day wore on, we focused on salvaging what we could from the pod. The work was tedious, but I could feel the momentum building as we made progress. With each component we managed to repair, my confidence grew. If we could find a way to patch the pod into the sensor systems, we might stand a fighting chance against Command if they found us. I could even see a glimmer of a plan forming in my mind, one that involved using Theta-9 to our advantage. It was late afternoon when the sensors finally activated with a series of beeps, pulling my attention away from the repairs. I rushed to the control panel, a rush of adrenaline coursing through me. "Amir," I shouted, "we've got a ship approaching." He dropped what he was doing and rushed over, his eyes glued to the screen. "What kind of ship?" "Not sure yet," I replied, trying to filter through the data. "It looks small, but it's moving fast. We might only have minutes before it arrives." "What's the plan?" Amir asked, urgency creeping into his voice. "Get the elisions into the pod," I instructed. "We'll seal it up, but I want to keep an eye on this ship. If it's Command, we need to know what they're planning." Amir nodded, moving quickly to gather the elisions. I continued to watch the readings as the ship drew closer, my heart racing. Moments later, I could make out the shape of the vessel on the screen, a sleek design with no markings. "It's not a Command ship," I breathed, surprised. "But who is it?" "Could it be another faction?" Amir asked, his brow furrowed. "What if they're here to capture us?" "I don't know," I admitted, a sinking feeling in my stomach. "We'll have to be cautious." The ship hovered over our location, and I could see the faint outline of it through the viewport. It was unlike anything I had seen before, a smooth, polished hull that glinted in the dim light of the moon. "Let's take cover," I said, signaling for Amir to join me behind the ridge. We crouched low, watching as the ship began to descend, its landing gear extending to touch down on the surface. I held my breath, anticipation coursing through me. What were they doing here? Would they be friend or foe? The ship's hatch opened, and figures began to emerge. I squinted to get a better look, my heart pounding in my chest. 3 figures stepped out, their forms silhouetted against the pale light of Theta-9. They moved with a fluid grace, and even from a distance, I could see they were not human. "Are they?" Amir started, his voice barely a whisper. "Elisions," I confirmed, realizing with a jolt that they were dressed in the distinctive garb of Elysian warriors. But they looked different. The 3 Elysians approached cautiously, their gazes sweeping the area. I felt a mix of hope and dread. These could be allies, but there was no guarantee. "Stay low," I whispered to Amir. "Let's see what they want." As they drew closer, I could see their features more clearly. Their plumage was darker, more subdued than those of the Elysians we had rescued. They moved with a purpose, their eyes scanning for any sign of danger. "Adrian," one of them called suddenly, their voice echoing across the barren landscape. "Amir, we've been searching for you." The voice was familiar. I recognized it instantly. "Kira," I called back, emerging from behind the ridge. "Is that you?" She stepped forward, relief evident in her expression. "We feared the worst after you left Elysia. When we heard about the attacks, we tracked your movements." "Attacks?" I repeated, confusion flooding my mind. "What are you talking about?" Kira exchanged glances with her companions, and her expression turned serious. "Command has been targeting Elysian enclaves across several systems. They're trying to eliminate our kind before we can establish alliances with other races." My stomach dropped. "And you think they're after us because we helped the Elysians?" "Exactly," Kira confirmed, stepping closer. "But we're here to help you. We need to leave Theta-9 before they track us here." I felt a rush of conflicting emotions. The chance to escape was tempting, but I needed to know more. How do you know we can trust you? Kira met my gaze, her eyes steady and unwavering. Because we're all in this together. I know it's hard to believe, but we're fighting for the same cause. The Elysians deserve a chance to thrive, and you've shown that you're willing to protect them. Amir stepped up beside me, his brow furrowed in thought. What's the plan? Then, how do we get out of here? We can't take our ship. It's too noticeable, Kira explained. We have a small shuttle hidden nearby. It's unmarked and fast, but we need to move quickly. Let's go, I said, glancing at Amir. We don't have much time. As we made our way to the shuttle, Kira filled us in on the situation. Command was launching a campaign against the Elysians, determined to eradicate them as a threat. News of our involvement had spread quickly, and our actions were seen as defiance against their authority. We have to regroup with the other Elysians, Kira insisted. If we can unite our forces, we might stand a chance against Command's brutality. I nodded, the gravity of her words sinking in. And the Elysians we rescued? They're safe for now, but we need to get them out of here before Command comes looking for you, she replied. The urgency in her tone was infectious. I knew we had to act quickly, but there was also a sense of hope igniting within me. We weren't alone in this fight anymore. The shuttle was small, barely enough to hold us all, but it was designed for speed and stealth. Kira and her companions took the controls, and as we lifted off from Theta 9, I felt a rush of relief. Hold on, Kira warned, her fingers flying over the controls. We're going to make a hard jump. I gripped the edges of my seat as the shuttle accelerated, the rocky surface of the moon quickly disappearing beneath us. The stars blurred as we entered the warp, the familiar sensation of weightlessness filling the cabin. As we exited the warp, the sight before us left me breathless. A small fleet of ships floated in the distance, a patchwork of designs and colors that spoke of the various species and cultures coming together. Welcome to the Coalition, Kira said, a proud smile on her face. This is where we stand united against Command. I looked around, a sense of belonging washing over me. We were no longer alone in our fight. There was a community, a coalition of forces ready to stand against the tyranny of Command. After landing, we disembarked and were greeted by a mix of Elysians and other species, an array of colors and cultures blending together in a unified front. I felt a surge of hope as I took in the sight, the realization that we could be part of something greater than ourselves. Let me introduce you to the Council, Kira said, leading us through the bustling gathering. They'll want to hear what you have to say about your experiences. As we walked, I absorbed the atmosphere of camaraderie. I felt a weight lift from my shoulders. We had allies now. We had a purpose. In the central area, we met the Council, a group of Elysians and representatives from other species. They listened intently as I recounted our story, detailing the struggles we faced with Command and the desperate situation we had fled. When I finished, a heavy silence filled the room. Finally, a tall Elysian with bright plumage stood and spoke. Your courage and determination to protect our kind is commendable. Together, we can work to build a coalition that can stand against Command. The others nodded in agreement, and I felt a rush of excitement. This was the beginning of something new, a chance to fight back against the oppression we had faced. Days turned into weeks as we settled into the coalition. The Elysians began to organize themselves, forming teams to gather intelligence and assess the threat Command posed. I found myself immersed in the planning, collaborating with both Amir and Kira. We worked tirelessly, forming strategies and building alliances with other species who had been victimized by Command's expansionist policies. Each day, I felt more at home among the diverse group, the sense of purpose driving us all forward. Yet, as we prepared for the inevitable confrontation, I couldn't shake the feeling of unease. We were up against a powerful enemy, one that had resources and influence spanning multiple systems. Are we ready for this? Amir asked one night as we reviewed our latest intel. What if they come at us with everything they have? I looked at him, understanding the worry etched on his face. We have to be. We've seen what they're capable of. We can't let them silence us. Amir nodded, but I could see the doubt lingering. I shared it. But we had come too far to back down now. We owed it to ourselves and to the Elysians to stand and fight. The day of the Coalition's first strike arrived, tension crackling in the air. We gathered in the main hall, warriors and strategists from various species coming together as one. Kira stood at the front, her voice steady as she outlined the plan. We will strike Command's supply lines. Disrupting their resources is crucial if we want to weaken their hold. This is our chance to send a message. Cheers erupted around the room, a surge of enthusiasm filling the space. I felt the adrenaline coursing through me, and for the first time in a long time, I believed we could win. As we prepared to board our ships, I glanced over at Amir. "You ready?" He smiled, a hint of mischief lighting his eyes. "Ready as I'll ever be." Together, we joined the thrumming pulse of excitement, boarding our respective ships, the Coalition's fleet ready for action. The battle was fierce, the void of space lit up with explosions and flashes of weapon fire. Our ships moved in tandem, executing the strategies we had rehearsed tirelessly. I maneuvered my ship alongside others, coordinating with the Elysians as we struck at Command's vessels. The initial strike had caught them off guard, and we capitalized on that momentum, pushing deeper into their territory. As I flew through the chaos, I felt a surge of determination. We were fighting not just for ourselves, but for all those who had been oppressed by Command's brutality. "Adrian, watch your six," Amir's voice crackled over the comms. I swerved to avoid an incoming shot, heart racing as I returned fire. "I see them," I shouted back, adrenaline pumping through my veins. The battle raged on, a mix of triumph and loss painting the void of space. I could see the impact of our actions as Command's ships faltered, their cohesion breaking. It felt like we were turning the tide, but the fight was far from over. Finally, after what felt like hours, we gained the upper hand. The remaining Command ships began to retreat, leaving us victorious. Cheers erupted through the comms as we regrouped, the adrenaline still surging through me. "We did it," Amir shouted, laughter ringing in his voice. "We did," I agreed, overwhelmed with a sense of accomplishment. But as we celebrated, I knew this was just the beginning. We had struck a blow against Command, but they wouldn't rest until they tried to reclaim control. In the following weeks, the Coalition continued to build on our victory, gaining momentum as more species joined our cause. The message of resistance spread across the systems, and with each new ally, our strength grew. But I couldn't shake the feeling that Command was planning something. Their silence was unsettling, and I urged the Council to remain vigilant. "Don't let your guard down," I warned during one of our meetings. "They're going to retaliate. We need to be prepared." The Council nodded, taking my words seriously. We fortified our defenses, establishing protocols for alerting our forces in case of an attack. One evening, as I sat in my quarters reviewing reports, the alarms blared to life. I rushed to the command center, finding chaos as the Coalition members scrambled to their posts. "Status report," I shouted, adrenaline surging as I focused on the main screen. "Command ships detected approaching from multiple vectors," Kira called, urgency lacing her voice. "They're coming for us." I felt my heart race as I processed the information. "How long do we have?" "Minutes," Kira shouted. "We need to prepare for an all-out assault." "Get everyone to their ships," I ordered, my voice steady despite the fear bubbling within me. "We can't let them catch us off guard." As the Coalition scrambled to defend against Command's impending assault, I felt a mix of dread and determination. We had fought hard to get to this point, and we couldn't let it end here. With my ship ready for battle, I joined the other members of the Coalition as we took to the stars once again. The thrill of battle coursed through me, and I felt a renewed sense of purpose. As we engaged Command's fleet, the chaos erupted around us. Explosions rocked the void as our ships clashed, and I felt the weight of our choices pressing down on me. "Keep moving," Amir shouted over the comms, urging our forces to stay coordinated. "Stay focused," I echoed, my heart racing as I dodged incoming fire. We couldn't let command push us back. The fight was relentless, but as we held our ground, I could feel the tide shifting. The determination of the coalition shone through, and I believed we could win. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, we began to turn the tide once more. Command ships faltered, and our forces pushed back, gaining ground. With one final strike, we managed to cripple the flagship of command, sending it spiraling into the void. Cheers erupted through the comms, a surge of triumph filling the air. "We did it!" Amir shouted, laughter ringing in his voice. Days turned into weeks as we continued to fortify our position. The coalition had become a formidable force, drawing in allies from across the galaxy. Kira and I worked closely together, strategizing our next moves and keeping a close eye on any potential threats. "We need to make sure command knows we're not backing down," I insisted during one of our meetings. "We need to strike hard and fast." She nodded, determination etched on her face. "We can't show any weakness. If we do, they'll see it as an opportunity." As we prepared for our next offensive, I felt a sense of camaraderie that I had never experienced before. We were a coalition now, united in purpose and resolve. But there was still uncertainty lingering. What would command do next? How could we ensure the safety of the Elysians and all our allies? The tension grew as we awaited our next confrontation, but I held on to the belief that together we could overcome any challenge. And as we stood on the precipice of battle once more, I knew that our fight was just beginning. We had chosen to stand against oppression, to fight for those who couldn't fight for themselves, and I believed with all my heart that we would prevail. The stars glimmered coldly against the backdrop of the void as our coalition prepared for the next phase of our campaign against command. The victory we had secured weeks ago was a beacon of hope, but it had also ignited a firestorm of conflict. Our enemy was not one to retreat quietly, and I could feel the tension in the air as we strategized our next move. Sitting in the main briefing room aboard the coalition flagship, I scanned the faces around me. Each of us was a testament to the resolve and unity that had brought us together. Elysians, humans, and representatives from several other species had gathered to plan our retaliation against command. Kira stood at the head of the table, her bright plumage slightly ruffled, betraying her calm facade. "We have a limited window to capitalize on our victory," she began, her voice steady but urgent. "Command is regrouping and likely plotting their next strike. We need to disrupt their operations and keep them on the defensive." "What's the target?" Amir asked, leaning forward, his hands clasped in front of him. "We've received intelligence that command is amassing a fleet at a hidden base in the Vesper system," Kira replied, her gaze unwavering. "If we can hit them before they're ready, we can cripple their ability to retaliate." The plan sparked a mix of excitement and apprehension in the room. We all knew the risks, but we also understood the stakes. The longer we allowed command to regroup, the stronger their position would become. "Intel suggests there are key supply lines and shipyards in that area," Kira continued. "If we destroy those, it will hinder their operations significantly." I felt a rush of determination. This was our chance to strike back, to ensure the sacrifices we'd made thus far meant something. "We should split into smaller strike teams," I suggested. "Hit them from multiple angles. It will create confusion and spread their defenses thin." "Agreed," Kira nodded. "We can deploy 2 teams, one to target the shipyards and the other to disrupt the supply lines. We'll use the element of surprise to our advantage." Amir raised an eyebrow. "And how do we get in and out without being detected?" Kira glanced at the tactical display, pointing to the Vesper system's layout. "There's an asteroid belt nearby. We can use it as cover to approach the base undetected. From there, we can launch our assault." The plan was solid, and I felt a swell of camaraderie as we finalized the details. "Let's do this," I said, my voice resolute. "We've come too far to let fear hold us back." Hours later, we boarded our ships, adrenaline coursing through my veins. The crew was energized, the anticipation palpable. Each member was a testament to the strength we had built as a coalition. We were no longer individuals fighting alone. We were a united front against a common enemy. As we approached the asteroid belt, I took a moment to gather my thoughts. The last battle had pushed us to our limits, but it had also shown us the strength of our resolve. I glanced at Amir, who sat in the co-pilot's seat, his fingers flying over the controls. "Ready?" I asked, my heart racing. "Always," he replied, a confident smile breaking through his usual seriousness. With the asteroids looming ahead, we navigated carefully, maneuvering through the rocky terrain. The sound of our engines hummed softly, blending with the ambient noise of the belt. It was eerie, the calm before the storm. "Approaching the target coordinates," I announced, my pulse quickening. "Let's stay sharp." As we neared the hidden base, the first glimpses of command ships came into view. They were clustered around the shipyards, oblivious to our approach. The base was a sprawling complex, marked by the sharp lines and metallic surfaces typical of command installations. On my mark, Kira's voice crackled over the comms, commanding and steady. 3, 2, 1, now. I pulled the trigger, launching a barrage of missiles toward the shipyards. The explosives struck true, detonating against the hulls of several vessels, and chaos erupted in an instant. "Go, go, go," Amir shouted, his hands gripping the controls tightly as we surged forward into the fray. Our ships darted through the chaos, weaving in and out of enemy fire as we targeted key structures. Explosions rocked the base, sending debris flying, and I could hear the exhilaration in the voices of our coalition members. "Target their supply lines," I yelled, glancing at the tactical display. "We need to cut off their reinforcements." We split our focus, my ship and Amir's racing toward a nearby facility marked as a storage depot. We blasted through defenses, our weapons lighting up the darkness of space as we pressed forward. "Adrian, watch out!" Amir shouted, pulling hard on the controls to evade incoming fire from a nearby command ship. "On it!" I adjusted our trajectory, firing back with precision. We were outnumbered, but the element of surprise was on our side. The battle raged on around us, the chaos of war igniting my senses. I focused on the mission, pushing aside any thoughts of doubt or fear. We had to succeed. Failure was not an option. As we breached the storage facility, I directed our weapons toward the heart of the depot. "Let's blow this thing sky high," I grinned, adrenaline fueling my determination. "Setting explosives," Amir confirmed, his fingers dancing over the console. We made quick work of the facility, rigging it with charges and preparing to retreat. Just as we were about to leave, alarms blared throughout the base, signaling that our presence was finally recognized. "Let's move," I urged, my heart racing as I scanned for an escape route. But as we rushed back to our ship, I noticed something out of the corner of my eye. A group of command soldiers was moving toward us, weapons drawn. "Adrian, we've got company," Amir shouted, urgency tinging his voice. I turned, adrenaline spiking as we were forced to engage. We fired back, taking down several soldiers, but more were closing in. The realization that we might be overwhelmed washed over me like a cold wave. "Let's retreat," I called out, pushing Amir to move faster. He nodded, and we sprinted toward our ship, the ground vibrating with the force of distant explosions. The charges we'd set would go off any moment, but we needed to make it out first. We jumped into the cockpit, just as the first explosion rocked the facility. The shockwave knocked us off balance, but Amir regained control quickly. "Hold on," he shouted as he powered up the engines. The ship jolted as we shot forward, leaving the facility behind in a fiery eruption. The sight of the explosion illuminated the space around us, and for a fleeting moment, I felt a surge of triumph. We had struck a blow against command, but the victory was short-lived. "Look out," Amir yelled, pulling hard on the controls as a command ship pursued us. We veered to the side, dodging incoming fire as we escaped into the asteroid belt. I could see the chaos behind us, flashes of light marking the destruction we'd left in our wake. "Get us to the rendezvous point," I directed, my heart racing. Amir focused on the controls, weaving through the asteroids as we sought to lose our pursuers. The rocks whirred past us, a blur of motion as we fought to stay one step ahead of command. Almost there, Amir grunted, sweat beading on his forehead. As we broke through the belt, I could see our coalition ships gathering in the distance. A wave of relief washed over me, but the sense of danger remained. "Keep going," I urged, watching as the command ship closed in behind us. "We need to make it back." We finally broke into open space, and I felt a moment of triumph as we approached the rendezvous point. The coalition ships were waiting, ready to receive us. "Adrian, we're not out of this yet," Amir warned, eyes wide as he navigated through the chaos. "Punch it," I ordered, adrenaline flooding my veins. As we made our final approach, the command ship unleashed a volley of fire. The explosions erupted around us, and I gripped the controls tightly, pushing us forward. Come on," I urged as we neared our allies. Just as we crossed the threshold into the safety of our fleet, a blast rocked our ship. The impact sent us careening, alarms blaring as we skidded to a halt. "Status report," I shouted, panic clawing at my chest. "Minor damage to the engines, but we're still operational," Amir replied, his voice steady even amid the chaos. The ship trembled, but we had made it. I felt a rush of relief and gratitude as the coalition ships surrounded us, ensuring our escape. Once we docked, I rushed out of the ship, heart still pounding. I was greeted by Kira, who looked both relieved and furious. "What happened out there?" she demanded, her voice sharp. "We set off the explosives, but command caught on," I explained, trying to catch my breath. "We were pursued, but we made it back." "Did you manage to cripple their operations?" Kira pressed. "Absolutely," I said, a sense of pride swelling within me. "We struck their supply lines and destroyed a significant portion of their shipyards." She nodded, the tension in her posture easing slightly. "Good work, both of you, but we need to be more careful next time." Amir stepped forward, determination etched on his face. "We can't let them regroup. They'll come after us again, and we need to stay one step ahead." I felt the weight of those words. We had won a battle, but the war was far from over. Command would retaliate, and we needed to be prepared for whatever came next. Days passed as we regrouped and reassessed our strategy. The aftermath of our mission had sent ripples through the coalition, and morale was high. We had dealt a significant blow to command, but I knew we couldn't rest on our laurels. Kira and I convened with the council, discussing our next moves. "We need to keep the pressure on command," I stated, leaning forward in my chair. "If we give them time to regroup, they will hit us harder than ever." The other council members nodded, understanding the urgency of the situation. "What are your suggestions?" one of them asked. "We need to gather more intelligence," I replied. "Find out what command is planning. We can't strike blindly. We need to know their weaknesses." Kira crossed her arms, her expression thoughtful. "I agree. We can't afford to lose our momentum. If we can secure more allies, we might be able to push them back even further." The council continued to discuss options, and I felt a sense of unity in our shared goal. We were not just fighting for ourselves, we were fighting for every species that had suffered under command's rule. As we worked to build our coalition, I couldn't shake the feeling of impending danger. Command was silent, but I knew better than to underestimate them. They would come back stronger, and we needed to be ready. A week later, I received a transmission from an unknown source. It crackled to life in the dim light of my quarters, and I felt a mix of excitement and trepidation. "Adrian?" The voice was distorted, but it held an urgency that sent chills down my spine. "I have vital information regarding command's next move." "Who is this?" I demanded, trying to get a clear read on the situation. "Someone who wants to help," the voice replied. "Meet me at the coordinates I'm sending. I have intel that could change everything." I felt a rush of adrenaline. Was this a trap? Could I trust this unknown ally? But the potential of gaining crucial information was too great to ignore. "Understood. I'll be there," I replied, my heart racing as I began to prepare for the meeting. As I traveled to the coordinates provided, I felt a mix of anticipation and unease. The ship hummed quietly around me, a constant reminder of the danger we faced. I was venturing into the unknown, and I had to stay alert. The coordinates led me to a small, abandoned asteroid, dark and desolate against the backdrop of space. I cautiously approached, scanning for any signs of life. My heart raced as I landed, uncertainty hanging in the air. "Adrian," the voice echoed in the silence as I stepped out of my ship. I turned to find a figure cloaked in shadows. "Who are you?" I asked, keeping my guard up. "Someone who knows about command," they replied, stepping into the light. "My name is Sarah, and I have information you need." I studied her, noting the weariness etched on her face and the determination in her eyes. "What do you know?" "Command is planning a major offensive against your coalition," Sarah warned, her voice steady. "They've been consolidating their forces, and they intend to strike soon. If you don't act quickly, they will crush everything you've built." My stomach twisted at her words. "How do you know this?" "I used to work for them," Sarah confessed, her voice low. "But I couldn't stand by any longer. I had to warn you." "Why should I trust you?" I pressed, skepticism lingering in my mind. "Because I've seen what they're capable of," she said, urgency filling her tone. "I want to help you stop them. You can't fight this alone." Her words struck a chord within me. I understood the stakes, the weight of our fight. "What do you propose?" "We need to act fast. Gather your coalition and prepare for a counteroffensive. I can provide intel on their movements and supply routes," she explained. "But you need to trust me." I hesitated, weighing my options. I could dismiss her, but if her information was accurate, it could save countless lives. "All right," I said finally. "But if I find out you're lying, I won't hesitate to do what I have to." She nodded, a flicker of relief crossing her face. "I understand. Now let's get to work." Back aboard the flagship, I briefed Kira and the council on my meeting with Sarah. "She claims to have vital information about Command's next offensive," I said, pacing in front of them. Kira raised an eyebrow, skepticism evident. "And you believe her?" "I think it's worth investigating," I replied, feeling the weight of their scrutiny. "If she's right, we need to be prepared." The council deliberated, weighing the risks. "What do you suggest?" one member asked. "We need to strengthen our defenses and gather as much intel as possible," I replied. "Sarah can help us understand Command's movements. We can't afford to be caught off guard again." After much discussion, the council agreed to put the plan into action. We would bolster our defenses while working with Sarah to gather intel. It felt like a gamble, but one that could pay off. As the days passed, I felt a sense of urgency growing. Sarah worked closely with our intelligence team, providing insights into Command's supply routes and tactical plans. Her knowledge was invaluable, and I found myself cautiously optimistic. But the shadow of doubt still loomed. I could see Kira's unease, and I shared her concerns. We had to remain vigilant, knowing that Command was always one step ahead. "Are you sure we can trust her?" Kira asked one evening, her expression thoughtful. "I want to believe she's on our side," I replied, grappling with my own uncertainty. "But we have to keep our guard up." The day of the planned counter-offensive arrived, and I felt a mix of excitement and dread. We had fortified our defenses, gathered intel, and prepared our coalition for the impending clash. As we moved into position, I glanced at Amir, who sat at the controls beside me. "Are you ready?" I asked, feeling the weight of the moment. "Let's show them what we're made of," he replied, determination etched on his face. The stars glimmered around us as we prepared for battle. Our coalition was strong, united in purpose, and I knew we were ready to face whatever Command had in store. As we moved toward the designated target, I took a deep breath, steeling myself for the fight ahead. We had come too far to back down now. We were fighting for freedom, for the Elysians, and for every species that had suffered under Command's rule. The moment arrived as we engaged Command's forces. the battle erupting into chaos once more. Ships darted through the void, beams of energy illuminating the darkness as our coalition fought valiantly against the enemy. "Stay focused," I shouted over the comms, guiding our forces as we pressed forward. We maneuvered through the tumult, taking down enemy ships and targeting critical structures. The adrenaline surged through me, pushing me to fight harder, to lead with conviction. But amidst the chaos, I felt an unsettling presence. It was as if a shadow lingered just out of reach, an ominous feeling that something was off. "Watch your flanks," Amir warned, scanning the battlefield for any signs of danger. I nodded, my instincts on high alert. We were holding our ground, but the tension in the air hinted at deeper currents at play. Command had a way of turning the tide when least expected. As the battle raged, I caught sight of Syrah on the tactical display, coordinating our forces from a nearby ship. She was engaged and focused, but I could sense an underlying tension in her demeanor. "Amir, keep an eye on her," I said quietly. "I don't want to be caught off guard." "Got it," he replied, his expression serious. We continued to push forward, but the unease lingered. Just as we began to gain the upper hand, a sudden shift occurred. Command's forces regrouped, launching a counteroffensive that sent shockwaves through our coalition. "Fall back! We're getting overwhelmed," I shouted, my voice rising above the din. But as we retreated, I felt a sinking realization wash over me. This was a trap, a calculated move by Command to lure us into a vulnerable position. "Amir, we need to regroup with the main fleet," I commanded, urgency coursing through me. "On it," he replied, pushing our ship to its limits as we maneuvered through the chaos. But as we fled, I saw Syrah's ship caught in the crossfire, engulfed in flames. My heart dropped. "No," I shouted, the fear rising within me. We had fought so hard, and now we were losing allies left and right. The realization hit me hard. We were in the depths of betrayal, and Command had struck with precision. "Focus, Adrian," Amir urged, pulling me back to the present. "Right," I breathed, shaking off the shock. We needed to escape, to regroup and come up with a new plan. Back aboard the flagship, the atmosphere was grim. We had suffered losses, and the toll of the battle weighed heavily on everyone. I felt a sense of helplessness wash over me as I looked around at my comrades, the faces of those who had fought bravely beside me. "Adrian," Kira said, her voice low, "we need to assess the situation. What happened out there?" I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. It was a trap. Command anticipated our movements and lured us into an ambush. We lost contact with several ships, and Syrah's ship was destroyed. Kira's expression darkened. "We need to regroup and reevaluate our strategy. We can't let them gain the upper hand again." As we gathered the remaining coalition members, I felt the weight of the moment. We were at a crossroads, and I knew that if we didn't act decisively, we could lose everything we had fought for. "Listen," I addressed the group, my voice steady. "We have faced setbacks before, but we are not defeated. We will regroup, gather our forces, and prepare for the next move. We are stronger together, and we will not let Command tear us apart." The murmurs of agreement filled the room, and I felt a surge of hope. We had to stay united, to find a way to turn the tide once more. Days turned into weeks as we regrouped and strategized. I found myself haunted by the loss of Syrah, her presence lingering in the back of my mind. I had trusted her, and now I couldn't shake the feeling that we had been betrayed. But I pushed those thoughts aside. We had a mission to complete, and I couldn't let doubt cloud my judgment. We needed to strike back, to remind Command that we would not be easily broken. As we gathered our forces once more, I felt a sense of determination rising within me. We had lost allies, but we were still a formidable coalition. It was time to act. "Are you ready for this?" Amir asked as we prepared to launch our next strike. "More than ever," I replied, feeling the fire of resolve burning within me. We set our sights on Command's remaining forces, a plan forming in my mind. We had to hit them where it hurt, to disrupt their operations and show them that we were still a threat. The day of our next offensive arrived, and the air was thick with anticipation. We were ready to take back what we had lost, to reclaim our strength. As we approached the target coordinates, I felt a rush of adrenaline. This was it. We were about to engage in a battle that would define our fate. "Stay focused, everyone," I called over the comms, my voice steady. "We know what's at stake, and we will fight for our freedom." With that, we launched our attack. The chaos erupted once more as ships engaged, energy beams illuminating the dark expanse of space. We maneuvered through the battle, targeting Command's key structures and disabling their defenses. I felt the adrenaline coursing through my veins, pushing me forward as I fought with every ounce of strength I had. But amidst the chaos, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. The shadows lingered, a sense of impending danger clawing at my instincts. "Adrian, watch out!" Amir shouted, pulling me back to reality as we dodged incoming fire. "Thanks," I replied, scanning the battlefield, but the sense of unease wouldn't leave me. As we pressed on, I caught sight of familiar ships moving in the distance. It was our allies, but there was a sense of urgency in their movements that set my instincts on edge. "Amir, what's going on?" I asked, confusion flooding my mind. "Looks like they're regrouping," he replied, concern etched on his face. Just as I was about to respond, a series of explosions erupted nearby, throwing our ship off course. I fought to regain control, but chaos reigned around us. "We need to pull back," I yelled, panic rising within me. But it was too late. The ambush had been set, and Command had executed their plan with deadly precision. "Adrian, we have to go," Amir urged, urgency in his voice. "Hold on," I shouted, maneuvering our ship through the chaos as we sought an escape route. But just as we thought we had a path, a sudden explosion rocked our ship, sending us spiraling into the depths of darkness. I felt a rush of fear as we lost control, my heart pounding in my chest. We were losing the battle, and the shadows of betrayal had finally closed in around us. "Adrian, get us out of here," Amir shouted, panic creeping into his voice. "I'm trying," I grunted, fighting to regain control. But the ship was damaged, systems flickering and alarms blaring around us. Just as I thought all hope was lost, I spotted a small opening in the debris, a chance to escape. "There, I see it," I called, directing our ship toward the opening. We surged forward, dodging incoming fire as we fought to break free. The darkness surrounded us, but I could feel the flicker of hope igniting within. "We made it," Amir exclaimed as we broke through the debris field, the chaos of battle fading behind us. But as we fled into the depths of space, I knew we couldn't stay hidden forever. Command would regroup, and they would come for us again. Back aboard the flagship, the atmosphere was heavy with defeat. We had suffered losses, and the realization of our vulnerabilities weighed on everyone's shoulders. I could feel the heaviness in the air, the uncertainty of what lay ahead. "We need to regroup and strategize," Kira said, her voice steady. "We can't afford to let Command take the upper hand again." I nodded, the determination within me igniting once more. "We need to find a way to strike back. We can't let them think they've won." As we worked tirelessly to plan our next move, I felt a sense of urgency driving us forward. We had to act quickly, to gather our strength and prepare for the battles ahead. Weeks passed, and we focused on rebuilding and strategizing. Syrah's absence was palpable, and I often found myself reflecting on her sacrifice. I had trusted her, and I couldn't shake the feeling that she had been betrayed. But as we prepared for our next strike, I pushed those thoughts aside. We were a coalition, united in our fight against Command. We had to stay strong, to find a way to reclaim what we had lost. As we launched our next offensive, I felt a surge of determination. We would not back down. We were fighting for our freedom, for our allies, and for every species that had suffered under Command's rule. We engaged in battle once more, the chaos of war igniting my senses. But this time, I felt a sense of clarity. We had faced betrayal, but we would rise stronger than before. "Stay sharp," I shouted, guiding our forces as we pressed forward. With every blast of energy, every explosion, I felt the weight of our mission. We were fighting for a future free from tyranny, and we would not be silenced. As the battle raged on, I found myself driven by a sense of purpose. We had suffered losses, but we were still standing. The determination within me surged as we pressed forward, reclaiming our strength. "Adrian, watch your flank," Amir warned, pulling me back to reality. "Thanks, I'm on it," I replied, focusing on the fight. We pushed through the chaos, targeting command structures and disrupting their operations. The adrenaline coursed through my veins as we fought valiantly, determined to make our mark. But just as we gained the upper hand, a sudden surge of enemy ships descended upon us. The realization struck hard. Command was regrouping, and they had come back stronger. "Fall back," I shouted, urgency flooding my voice. But as we retreated, I knew we had to find a way to turn the tide once more. We had faced betrayal, but we were not defeated. Back aboard the flagship, the council gathered once more. The weight of our losses hung heavy in the air, but I could feel the determination rising among us. "We cannot let command crush us," I stated firmly. "We must regroup, strategize, and strike back with everything we have." Kira nodded, her expression resolute. "We are stronger together, and we will not let them tear us apart." As we formulated our next plan, I felt a sense of unity surrounding us. We had faced betrayal and loss, but we would rise stronger than before. "Let's show them what we're made of," I said, a fierce determination burning within me. In a forgotten corner of the galaxy, on a desolate planet named Ilara, a small band of rebels fought against the oppressive regime of the Galactic Council. The Council had systematically exterminated any species that threatened its power, and now only a few races remained to defy them. Among the rebels was Mira, a skilled pilot from the planet Zephyria, whose fiery spirit burned brighter than the twin suns that lit her home world. Ilara was not an ideal hiding place. Its surface was barren, dotted with jagged rocks and treacherous canyons. Yet, it offered a sense of isolation that the rebels desperately needed. The Council was relentless in its pursuit, sending patrol ships to sweep through the system and eradicate any sign of resistance. Every day was a battle for survival. As Mira stood watch at their makeshift base, a hollowed-out cave illuminated by flickering lights, her mind raced with plans for their next move. The Council had grown suspicious of their activities, and time was running out. They needed supplies, intelligence, and, most importantly, a way to strike back. "Hey, Mira," called out Rian, a tech-savvy engineer with a penchant for tinkering. He emerged from the shadows, his face smeared with grease and his goggles perched on his forehead. "I managed to modify our communication array. We can now intercept the Council's transmissions." Mira's heart quickened. "That's fantastic. Rian, can we get intel on their movements?" "Exactly. I'm tuning in now," Rian replied, fingers flying over the controls. The static of the universe hummed in the background as the array powered up. As Rian worked, Mira's thoughts drifted to her past. She had once been a part of the Council, a promising pilot in their elite squadron. But after witnessing the atrocities committed against her people, she had defected, choosing to fight for those who had lost everything. The weight of her decisions pressed heavily on her heart, but there was no turning back now. The array crackled to life, and a voice broke through the noise. "Scheduled for deployment to Sector 9 in 2 cycles. High-value targets identified." "Hold it," Mira shouted, leaning in closer. "What's the target?" "Rebel base on Ilara. Prepare for a full assault." Mira's stomach dropped. They were coming for them. "Rian, can you pinpoint their location?" "Already on it," he said, his fingers moving rapidly. "They'll be here in under an hour." Mira took a deep breath, adrenaline coursing through her veins. "We need to gather everyone. This is our last chance to make a stand." Rian nodded, urgency taking over as he dashed out of the cave. Mira followed closely behind, calling out to the small group of rebels scattered across the rocky terrain. Each one had their own story of loss and betrayal, but they were united in their fight against the Council. Within minutes, the rebels assembled, their faces marked by determination. "Listen up," Mira commanded, her voice steady. "We've intercepted a transmission. The Council is coming for us, and we need to prepare for an assault." Murmurs spread through the group, a mix of fear and resolve. Mira could see the tension etched on their faces, but she knew they couldn't falter now. "We'll set up defenses around the cave and prepare for a counterattack," she continued. "Rian, I need you to work on that array and try to scramble their communications. If we can disrupt their signals, it might buy us some time." Rian nodded, already on his way to gather the necessary tools. "Everyone else, let's fortify our position. We need to make this cave impenetrable." The rebels moved swiftly, gathering rocks and debris to create barricades. Mira's heart swelled with pride as she watched them work together, a testament to their resilience. As the minutes ticked by, the atmosphere grew heavy with anticipation. Mira took a moment to breathe, recalling the stories of her people and the destruction they had faced. She couldn't let their sacrifice be in vain. Suddenly, the ground shook beneath them as the sound of approaching ships echoed in the distance. The rebels fell silent, eyes wide with fear and determination. Mira stood tall, her mind racing with strategies. "Remember, we fight for our freedom. We will not let them take us," she shouted, raising her fist in solidarity. As the ships descended, beams of light pierced the darkness. The Council's forces had arrived. Mira felt a mix of fear and exhilaration. This was the moment they had prepared for. "Positions," Mira barked, directing everyone to their posts. They took their places behind the barricades, weapons ready. The first wave of soldiers charged in, their armor glinting under the harsh lights. Mira's heart pounded as she aimed her blaster, steadying her breath. This was it. The rebels opened fire, the sound of blasters filling the air as they fought back against the invading forces. Mira's shots found their mark, and she felt a rush of adrenaline as they held their ground. But the Council's soldiers were relentless. "Rian," she yelled over the chaos. "How's that array coming?" "Almost done," he shouted back, sweat dripping from his brow. "Just a little longer." The battle raged on, and Mira fought with everything she had. She moved through the chaos, taking down enemies one by one, her resolve unwavering. The cave became a cacophony of blaster fire and shouts, a fierce testament to their struggle. But as the Council pressed forward, it became clear that they were outnumbered. Mira could see the fear creeping into the eyes of her comrades. They were fighting for their lives, but the enemy was relentless. "Rian," she shouted again, desperation creeping into her voice. "We need that array up now." "I'm almost there," he replied, panic evident in his tone. Just as the soldiers began to breach the barricades, Rian shouted, "Got it! Scrambling their communications now." Mira watched as the lights flickered around them, and the Council's soldiers hesitated, confusion spreading among their ranks. It was their chance. "Push forward," Mira commanded, rallying her comrades. With renewed vigor, they surged forward, fighting back with everything they had. The tide of battle began to shift as the rebels pushed the Council's forces back. Mira felt a surge of hope. They were not going to give in. But just when it seemed they were gaining the upper hand, a shadow loomed behind them. A Council ship, larger than any they had encountered, descended from the sky, casting a dark shadow over the battlefield. "No?" Mira whispered, dread washing over her. As the ship opened fire, a blast of energy struck the cave, sending debris flying. The ground shook violently, and Mira struggled to maintain her balance. The rebels scattered, panic rising as they realized the new threat. "Fall back," Mira shouted, urgency in her voice. "We need to regroup." The rebels retreated, desperate to escape the onslaught. Mira's heart raced as she pushed through the chaos, determined to lead them to safety. "Get to the ship," she yelled, pointing to their escape vessel. But just as they reached it, more Council soldiers emerged, cutting off their escape. Mira felt a surge of despair, but she couldn't give up. "Fight! We're not done yet," she shouted, rallying her comrades. With renewed strength, they fought back, determined to reach their ship. Mira was at the front, leading the charge, firing her blaster with precision. As they neared the ship, the council soldiers closed in, but the rebels pressed forward, refusing to back down. Finally, they reached the vessel, scrambling aboard just as the last of their forces made it inside. "Go! Go!" Mira shouted at the pilot, her heart racing as the ship lifted off the ground. As they soared into the sky, Mira looked back at the chaos below. The battle raged on, but they had survived. They had fought for their freedom, and though they had lost much, they had not lost hope. As they escaped into the stars, Mira's resolve burned brighter than ever. They would regroup, rebuild, and continue their fight against the council. The last sanctuary of their people might have been lost, but their spirit remained unbroken. The rebellion would continue, and one day they would reclaim their freedom. As the ship, the Phoenix, soared through the cosmos, the crew was a mix of exhilaration and despair. Mira stood at the cockpit, staring out into the void, her mind swirling with thoughts of their recent battle on Alara. They had survived, but the cost had been high. She felt the weight of the loss in her chest, an ache that mirrored the scars of her past. Rion entered the cockpit, his expression a mixture of determination and concern. "We need to talk about what happened back there," he said, crossing his arms. "We can't keep running forever. The council won't stop until we're wiped out." Mira turned to him, nodding solemnly. "I know. We need a plan. But first, we need to regroup and assess our losses." Rion sighed, rubbing the back of his neck. "I'll set up a communications link to the other rebel cells. We need to see who's still with us and what resources we can muster." As Rion moved to the control panel, Mira's thoughts drifted to her fellow rebels. They had fought valiantly, but many had been lost. She couldn't shake the feeling of responsibility weighing down on her. If she had made different choices, would they still be alive? Rion's voice pulled her from her thoughts. "Mira, I've established contact with a few of the nearby cells. They're eager to join forces, but we need to decide on our next move." "What do you suggest?" Mira asked, trying to focus on the present. "Since the council is ramping up their efforts, we should consider launching a surprise attack on one of their supply depots. Disrupting their resources would give us an advantage," Rion proposed, his fingers flying over the controls. "I've identified a location on the outskirts of the Trion system. It's heavily guarded, but with our combined forces, we might stand a chance." Mira weighed the option, the gears in her mind turning. "It's risky, but we need to hit them where it hurts. Gather the others. We'll hold a strategy meeting." As Rion relayed the message, Mira stepped back from the cockpit, her mind racing. They needed to regain the initiative, but the shadow of Alara lingered, a reminder of their mortality. Soon, the crew gathered in the ship's common area, a small space filled with makeshift furniture and the remnants of their previous lives. Mira looked around at the faces of her comrades, each one was a survivor, and together they formed a new family forged in the fires of battle. "Thank you all for coming," Mira began, her voice steady. "We've suffered great losses, and the council will not give us a moment's peace. But we can't let their oppression silence us. We have a chance to strike back at their supply lines, and I want to hear your thoughts." The room was silent for a moment, the weight of their losses hanging heavy in the air. Then, Rion spoke up. "I believe we can disrupt their supply routes. We've seen how the council reacts to losses. It throws them into disarray." One of the newer recruits, a young man named Cade, leaned forward. "But what if we fail? The council will retaliate, and we could lose more lives." Mira met his gaze, determination fueling her words. "Every battle carries risk, Cade. We fight for our freedom, and sometimes that means facing the unknown. If we do nothing, we'll only allow the council to tighten their grip." "Exactly," Rion added, nodding. "But we'll need a solid plan. I can hack their security systems to create a diversion." The discussions continued, ideas bouncing around the room like energy. They brainstormed tactics, strategies, and potential escape routes. As Mira listened to their voices, she felt a flicker of hope igniting in her chest. By the time they concluded their meeting, a plan was taking shape. They would strike at dawn, using stealth and speed to their advantage. It was a dangerous mission, but it was necessary. As the crew dispersed to prepare for the operation, Mira found herself alone in the common area, her thoughts drifting back to Alara. The faces of her fallen comrades haunted her. She had to honor their memory by fighting with everything she had. The next morning arrived with a sense of urgency in the air. The crew moved swiftly, each one aware of the stakes. Mira suited up, fastening her armor with a sense of determination. Today, they would reclaim their destiny. "Are you ready?" Rian asked, appearing beside her. He wore a determined expression, his usual quirkiness replaced by focus. Mira nodded. "Let's do this." They gathered at the hangar bay, the adrenaline coursing through their veins. The small transport ships they would use were sleek and designed for speed. As they boarded, Mira felt a rush of anticipation. This was their moment. Rian took the pilot seat, quickly running through pre-flight checks. The others settled in, tension palpable in the air. Mira looked around at her crew, their faces set with resolve. She knew that whatever happened today, they would face it together. The ship lifted off, piercing the atmosphere as they headed toward the Tryon system. Mira kept her gaze focused on the screen, tracking their route to the supply depot. They had to remain under the radar, avoiding Council patrols as they approached their target. Rian navigated with precision, avoiding detection as they closed in on the depot. The structure loomed ahead, heavily fortified with turrets and guards. Mira felt her pulse quicken as they prepared to execute their plan. "All right, we're approaching the drop zone," Rian said, his voice steady. "We'll deploy here and move in silently." Mira took a deep breath, her heart racing. "Stay sharp, everyone. Remember your roles." As they touched down, Mira felt the familiar rush of adrenaline. They disembarked, moving with purpose as they crept through the shadows, their hearts pounding in unison. The supply depot was a hive of activity, guards patrolling and cargo drones buzzing overhead. Mira signaled to her team, indicating their positions as they spread out to prepare for their assault. "Rian, can you access their security system?" Mira whispered, keeping her voice low. "Already on it," he replied, tapping into his wrist device. "I'll create a diversion in 3, 2, 1. Suddenly, a series of explosions erupted on the opposite side of the depot. Alarms blared as guards rushed to investigate the disturbance. Mira took advantage of the chaos, leading her team deeper into the compound. They moved quickly, their training kicking in as they navigated through the labyrinth of crates and equipment. Mira felt the thrill of the hunt, the adrenaline fueling her actions. "Rian, we need to locate the main supply area," she said, her voice firm. "On it," he replied, his fingers flying over his device. "It should be just up ahead. Follow me." As they turned a corner, they found themselves facing a large door marked with security codes. Rian approached it, working quickly to bypass the lock. "I've got this," he murmured, his brow furrowed in concentration. The door clicked open, and Mira motioned for her team to move in. They entered a vast room filled with crates marked with the Council's insignia. Supplies, weapons, and equipment, all essential for the Council's war machine. "Here it is," Mira breathed, surveying the bounty before them. "Let's set the charges and get out." They worked swiftly, planting explosives around the crates while keeping an eye on the door. Mira could feel the tension in the air, a sense of urgency urging them to finish quickly. "Charges set," Rian confirmed, his voice laced with excitement. "We're good to go." "Let's move," Mira commanded, leading her team back toward the exit. But just as they turned to leave, the door slammed shut behind them. "What the?" Cade exclaimed, panic rising in his voice. "Stay calm," Mira shouted, her heart racing. "Rian, can you override the lock?" "I'm trying," he replied, furiously tapping at his device. "But it's jammed." Mira's mind raced as she scanned the room. They were trapped, and the alarms were still blaring. She could hear footsteps approaching from the outside. "We need to find another way out." The crew began searching frantically for an alternative exit. As Mira moved toward a corner of the room, she spotted a vent leading up to the ceiling. "There," she pointed. We can escape through there." "Are you serious?" Cade asked, disbelief in his eyes. "We don't have a choice," Mira replied, urgency in her tone. "Rian, can you get it open?" He nodded, quickly making his way to the vent. As he pried it open, Mira could hear the guards approaching, their footsteps echoing through the corridor. "Go, go," Mira urged, pushing the others toward the vent. One by one, they climbed into the narrow space, squeezing through the tight confines. Mira felt the heat rising in her chest as she realized how close they were to being caught. As the last of her crew squeezed in, Mira heard the door burst open. Guards flooded into the room, their weapons drawn. She pushed forward, adrenaline coursing through her veins as she crawled through the vent. "Keep moving," she urged, the sound of chaos echoing behind them. They crawled through the vent, the heat of the depot pressing in on them. Mira focused on the sound of her team's breaths, urging them to stay together. After what felt like an eternity, they reached the end of the vent. It opened into a small maintenance room, and Mira quickly slipped out, motioning for the others to follow. "Stay quiet," she whispered, peeking out the door. The coast seemed clear, but she knew they didn't have much time. They slipped out into the hallway, moving cautiously as they retraced their steps. The alarm still blared, and Mira felt her heart pounding in her chest. They had to reach the ship before the guards could regroup. As they approached the exit, Mira spotted a group of guards gathering near the entrance. "This way," she whispered, leading her crew down a different corridor. They moved quickly, ducking into a side room to avoid detection. Mira felt the tension building, the weight of their situation pressing down on her. They had come too far to be caught now. "Rian, how much time do we have before those charges go off?" Mira asked, her voice barely above a whisper. "Less than 5 minutes," he replied, his brow furrowed in concentration. Mira nodded, glancing around the room for any possible escape routes. "We need to create a distraction to get past those guards." Rian's eyes lit up. "I can hack into their security system and trigger an alarm on the opposite side of the depot. It'll draw their attention away from us." "Do it," Mira urged, her heart racing. "We'll be right behind you." Rian nodded and began working on his device. The others watched anxiously as the seconds ticked by. Mira felt a surge of determination. They had fought too hard to give up now. "All right, it's ready," Rian said, his fingers hovering over the controls. "On my mark, I'll trigger the alarm. We need to move fast." Mira took a deep breath, nodding at him. "Mark." With a press of a button, the alarms blared, and chaos erupted on the other side of the depot. Guards rushed to respond to the disturbance, giving Mira and her crew the opening they needed. "Now!" Mira shouted, leading the way as they dashed toward the exit. They sprinted down the corridor, adrenaline fueling their every step. As they neared the entrance, Mira could see the guards distracted by the alarms. They burst through the doors and out into the open, the cool air hitting their faces like a breath of fresh hope. "Over there," Mira pointed to their ship, which was still waiting for them in the distance. They sprinted toward the Phoenix, urgency pushing them forward. Mira glanced back, spotting guards regrouping. They were not safe yet. "Get inside. Rian, take the controls," she yelled, her heart racing as they reached the ship. Rian dashed to the pilot's seat, quickly powering up the systems. The others scrambled aboard, urgency driving them as they prepared for takeoff. Mira stood at the entrance, watching the approaching guards. "We need to hold them off." "Just get in," Rian shouted, his fingers flying over the controls. "I can't take off until everyone is inside." Mira took a deep breath, weighing the risk. "Fine, but hurry." As the last of her crew climbed aboard, Mira turned to face the guards rushing toward them. She raised her blaster, taking aim. "Let's make this count." The guards opened fire, and Mira returned fire, feeling the heat of the battle surge through her. They needed to buy Rian time to get the ship off the ground. Just as the last guard fell, Mira heard the engines roar to life. "Let's go!" Rian shouted, and the ship lifted off the ground. Mira dashed inside, securing the hatch just as the guards fired their weapons. Blaster shots ricocheted off the hull, but they were safe now. "Rion, punch it!" Mira commanded, her heart racing. With a surge of speed, the Phoenix shot into the sky, leaving the chaos of the supply depot behind. As they broke through the atmosphere, a wave of relief washed over Mira. "We did it," Cade whispered, disbelief evident in his voice. Mira took a moment to catch her breath, adrenaline still coursing through her veins. "We survived. We'll regroup and figure out our next move." Mira stood on the bridge of the Phoenix, watching the stars twinkle against the backdrop of the infinite void. The crew had settled into their respective roles, the tension of their recent escape slowly dissipating, replaced by a renewed sense of purpose. They had struck a blow against the Council, and the exhilaration of their success was palpable. "Rion," she called out, her voice steady, "run a systems check. I want to make sure we're prepared for anything. We can't afford to let our guard down." "On it," Rion replied, his fingers dancing over the controls. "We'll be fully operational in no time." As he worked, Mira glanced around at her crew. Each face held a mix of determination and fatigue, but there was also a spark of hope. They had survived the Council's grasp, and now they were ready to fight back. She could feel the weight of their trust resting on her shoulders. Cade approached, his expression earnest. "What's our next move? We can't keep hiding forever." Mira took a deep breath, gathering her thoughts. "We need to regroup with the other rebel cells. We have to show them that we're still in this fight. If we can unify our forces, we stand a chance against the Council." "Agreed," Cade said, nodding. "But we need to be strategic about it. If we go in blind, we risk losing everything we've worked for." Rion chimed in. "I can tap into the Council's communications network. If they're planning anything, we'll know about it. It'll give us an edge." Mira smiled, appreciating their resilience. "Let's do that. And while we're at it, I want to gather intel on their supply routes. If we can disrupt their operations again, we'll force them to spread their resources thin." As the crew began to strategize, Mira felt the weight of responsibility lift, replaced by a sense of camaraderie. They were no longer just survivors. They were a unified force, determined to reclaim their future. Days passed, filled with planning and preparation. They received word from other rebel cells, rallying support and resources for the next phase of their campaign. Each message reignited their hope, reminding them that they were not alone in their struggle. Finally, the day arrived. Mira stood at the helm, flanked by Rion and Cade, as the crew gathered for their briefing. The atmosphere was charged with anticipation. "Listen up," Mira began, her voice steady. "We've faced challenges that would have broken lesser crews, but we've emerged stronger. Today, we take the fight to the Council. We disrupt their operations, we rally our allies, and we show them that humanity will not be silenced." Cheers erupted among the crew, their spirits lifted by her words. Mira felt a rush of determination as she saw the fire in their eyes. As the Phoenix hurtled through the stars, the crew prepared for battle. They would not shy away from the dangers ahead. They would face them head-on. This was not just about survival anymore. It was about liberation. As they approached their target, Mira's heart raced with anticipation. They were ready, they were united, and together they would ignite a revolution. The stars outside shimmered, a silent witness to their resolve. This was the beginning of something greater, a fight for their freedom, and Mira knew they would not back down. The Council would learn that humanity was a force to be reckoned with, and they would not be extinguished.